Austro-Hungarian Jewry, the train stopped about a kilometre out, and people had to walk in. In 1944, when the aim was to destroy Hungarian Jewry in a matter of months, so they brought the train tracks into Birkenau, so that people could be processed quicker. And we'll go there soon. When people got off the train, obviously they were selected, and we'll do that soon as well. And people who were selected to live, that's what we're dealing with at the moment. They were initially taken right to the end of the camp, in the right-hand corner, to a place that we won't visit today. It's quite a long walk, called the sauna. And the sauna was a place where they processed the Jews who were going to live. And they removed their clothes, they removed their hair, they tattooed them in Auschwitz, they tattooed them, and they gave them clothes. Of course, it's obvious to us, right, that the clothes that they gave them, they weren't tailor-made to fit. They threw you a pair of trousers, they threw you a shirt. If it fitted, it fitted. If it didn't, it didn't. And you can, just small problems that you don't even think of, is what happens if you get a big pair of trousers that keep falling down. You have to find a piece of string. And if you can't find a piece of string, you've got a problem. If you get shoes that don't fit your feet, then within days you're going to have sores and blisters, which will very quickly be infected, and you will find yourself in the hospital and then in the gas chamber. Shirts as well, with buttons, without buttons. It wasn't like when we go to the army, and they have to suit you properly. And that's what they got. They got their clothes, their hair was shaven, they walked out of the sauna, and then they went to the barracks. There were people working, we mentioned it briefly again, we won't get there today. There was a place, bless you, right next to the sauna that was called Canada. And Canada was a place named Canada because Canada was thought of as a peaceful and quiet place, which I believe it still is. And that was the best place to work, because people working there didn't wear prisoners' uniforms, they didn't have their hair cut, and they were the people who sorted everything that came in. So they had an abundance of food there, because whatever Jews had brought that was sewn into their clothes, they could take, not legally, but they could take, and they lived in relatively good conditions, the people in Canada. They weren't thin, they weren't very thin, they were eating, they were clothed, and as I say, they lived as normal as anyone can live. The other people who were processed were then brought to these kind of barracks. What we're standing in at the moment, we have two areas here in the camp. We always go in opposite directions because we split groups. So I always go to the left, and Jeremy comes this side. On the other side of the camp, you have barracks that haven't been touched really. This is the area that they want most groups to come, because everything is set up. There is no latrine open on the other side of the camp. They've closed all the latrines. There is one or two barracks open over there, but we wanted you to see a latrine as well. So this is part of the dehumanization of people, where they have to come here to the bathroom. You can see what the reality is here. In front of everyone together, and no hygiene here, right? There was a commando here called the Schweizer Commando. It was a very good job, because the Germans didn't come in here because the Germans didn't want to get, they didn't want to get any diseases that they might find. So it was a perk to work in here, and you can imagine the stench. It wasn't as clean as this. There are other things here that we have to, sensitive issues that we have to relate to as well. When women came here, within a short period of time of arriving here, their periods stopped. They were convinced that the Germans were putting bromide in their water. It's not true, as it happens. It's not that they didn't have any rachmanas, but it wasn't what was happening. What was happening, it's just that the body, when it's losing so much energy, it works logically, and it closes down the departments that it doesn't need anymore, or doesn't need at the moment. And so that's really why. But people didn't know that, and I think the only hope there can be here with a young woman who comes into these barracks is that there's a future, and now that's gone. as far as she's concerned, she has no idea if she'll get out, and she has no idea if she'll get out, she'll be able to give birth. And that's the kind of yiush, the kind of despair that would hit someone, despite the absolute filth that people are living in. There is, besides the latrines, there are rooms like this with sinks that go for the entire length of the room, and taps. I want to, something that is very unique about the writings of Primo Levi. I haven't read everything, but I've never read anyone who writes in the same style as Primo Levi, because whereas most people write historically or psychologically, Primo Levi runs through the Holocaust by describing people. Actually, people that he just describes what happened to him when he was here. Most of the survivors of Auschwitz are either Hungarian, because they were the last ones here, and a group of Italians. It wasn't the majority of Italians weren't brought here, but quite an amount of Italians were brought here, because both governments, both the Hungarian government and the Italian government, despite being allies of Adolf Hitler, refused to deport their Jews to anyone. The Hungarians wouldn't deport their Jews until Horthy had to capitulate, and then the Nazis entered Hungary and they took the fascist government over there, and then they started deporting Jews. And when Hitler went into Italy, and he saved Mussolini's life, imprisoned Mussolini, he sent commandos to free Mussolini, and when the Germans entered Italy and they entered Hungary, then they started deporting the Jews at a most incredible rate. And there's obviously a difference. There's a difference between Hungarian Jews from Budapest who never made it here, because they were marched in the end, but that had a lot to do with Raoul Wallenberg, and the Jews in the Städtler, who essentially came directly from the Städtler to here. Not much ghetto time at all, on the trains and directly to Auschwitz, and they got here and they had to deal with what they had to do. That's Elie Wiesel, is a man coming from a shtetl. And so in his book, If This Is a Man, which I think he wrote a number of books, and I found so tragic about Primo Levi, 45 years after the war, he committed suicide. 45 years after, he was still in trauma, having written everything that he'd written, and committed suicide. Not a religious man, but something that caught my eye almost immediately when I looked at the book was this man that he describes, a man who he calls, his name was Steinlauf. It's a man that he met the day after he'd arrived here, and he's in one of these barracks. Primo Levi worked in Camp 3. Something that Rav Perez related to the other day. The Germans bombed Auschwitz, you know that. They bombed Auschwitz 3. They bombed Auschwitz 3. And bombs fell here, but by accident. They mamish flew over here to bomb Auschwitz 3. And there's even... The German, the Allies. The Allies flew over and they bombed... The Allies flew over and they bombed Auschwitz 3. A few bombs fell here by accident. They had bombs, flew over. They even took reconnaissance pictures where you can see Jews walking to the gas chambers. You can see dots. Anyone who knows how to read these maps can see what it is. But it's not like they were flying they were in Dresden and they were in Hamburg, and they mamish flew over here, and people, survivors, have said that they prayed that they would drop bombs in. And this was at the height of Hungarian Jewry. So he describes Steinlauf, and Steinlauf says as follows. He says, "We are slaves, deprived of every right, exposed to every insult, condemned to certain death, but still we possess one power, and we must defend it with all our strength." This is, Darren, in addition to what you spoke about last night, when we talk about Gevurah. "For it is the last, the power to refuse our consent. I must confess it, after only 1 week of prison, the instinct of cleanliness disappeared in me. I wander aimlessly around the washroom when I suddenly see Steinlauf, my friend, aged almost 50, with nude torso, scrubs his neck and shoulders with little success. He had no soap, but great energy. Steinlauf sees me and greets me, and without preamble asks me severely why I do not wash. Why should I wash? He has finished washing and is now drying himself with his cloth jacket, which he was holding before wrapped up between his knees, and which he will soon put on. And without interrupting the operation, he administers me a complete lesson, precisely because the lager was a great machine to reduce us to beasts. We must not become beasts. To tell the story, to bear witness, and that to survive we must force ourselves to save at least the skeleton, the scaffolding, the form of civilization. So we must certainly wash our faces without soap in dirty water and dry ourselves in our jackets. We must walk erect, without dragging our feet, not in homage to Prussian discipline, but to remain alive and not to begin to die. So a man is like, imagine like going to the toilet, cleaning himself and scrubbing himself and remaining dirty, just to remain but similar looking. We're going to go from here.